Hey, we are live streaming now. We're 4 minutes after 10 o'clock on Tuesday, September 6th, day after Labor Day weekend. Hope this finds everybody well. I'm Shannon Adcock, founder of Awake Illinois and mom of three. Glad to have my friend here, Tom DeVore, for Illinois Attorney General. Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Shannon?
Good, good. So we'll give people a few minutes to come on. Maybe people are grabbing a cup of coffee. I have mine here. I'm on my second cup. So while we wait for people to come on, Tom, what are the posters behind you?
These are posters that I've acquired from children over the last year or so. Uh, this one here was from Aiden. He drew all kinds of stuff on it, so it was really nice, And then this one over here that you can see with the heart on it, that's actually a mama bear and a baby bear. I thought that was a pretty good one. So
that's cute.
Mark Vargas loves that stuff. And then there's another one. So I've just collected these over time. I've got several of those and hundreds of little cards and stuff that kids have given me. So
that's awesome. So you'll have decor. Then you'll have some decor for your Attorney General office.
Well, I have them all over the place.
That's great. All right. So people are coming in. I can see. Hi, Chuck. Hi, Helen. People, do you see those comments on the right-hand side, Tom? People are saying hello.
Yes, I see it.
Good. Okay. So you're live from the campaign trail. I wanted us to take a little bit of a stroll down memory lane because this time a year ago, September of 2021, a lot of parents, including myself, a lot of communities were hoping and praying that school districts would allow due process for their kids. And unfortunately, it was a battle. So why don't you just take us through? I have some pictures here. We can just kind of go through, like, what were some of the first fights that you took on?
You're talking about the fights like in the fall of 21, because we can go all the way back to March.
Well, we can go further back. No, go back. Go as far back as you want to.
All right. So, I mean, the fighting, for a lack of better words, started way back in April of 2020 when, Governor Pritzker took it upon himself to become tyrant. And I'm using that word technically. I'm not even using it to create drama, where he started using executive authority, the appearance of executive authority, to do some very drastic things. I mean, it was a complete turnabout from the self-governance that we founded this nation on, and, doing it under the guise of an emergency, which is, many people of our generation think that that's unique. It's not unique. Emergencies have been used to control people for millenniums. And so this was just our version of it in our lifetime. And I knew that it was not appropriate. And I, at least at that time, was convinced that people would stand up for it. And eventually it happened, but it took longer than I would have hoped. But, so we started suing the governor back in April of 2020 to try to get people to understand that he doesn't have the power to do the things that he was doing. And ultimately it was going to rest with the people to put an end to it, because, legislators and government actors in general are typically cowardly, and they weren't going to do anything. So we started way back then. But the issue of today for most of the parents dealing with children, etc., that fight really started in about, from my experience, July of 2021.
Yes. Yeah. No, we were definitely, Awake Illinois was trying to empower parents to speak up to their school boards and reference the statutes. And, through the fall, I see you're here at one of the school board meetings. You were speaking out in your communities down there. What was that like? What were you hearing from parents?
Well, the parents were, again, the law, when we talk about what the law says and doesn't say, I always tell people the law says whatever the people say it says. So, laws can be changed, laws can be interpreted, laws can have all kinds of things. So ultimately, when people say this is enough, we're done, everybody gets out of their way. Everybody, even tyrants. And so me trying to educate people on what the law said, the governor had some twisted, perverted version of what the law says that he was using his bully pulpit to try to convince people of. I was explaining to them what the law says. our interpretation was the accurate one, but reasonable minds could disagree. All I had to do was convince people that that's what the law said. And once that happens, it was over. And so going and doing that was the hardest part. And when people are people, and so when they're frustrated and they're scared and they're upset because they see their children suffering, they explaining to them what the law says sometimes doesn't mean a lot to them, because that they're not lawyers, they're not they don't care what's going on in the law. They just want their kids to quit suffering, and that suffering was real to them. And so me trying to convince them that not only do you have to have an understanding of the law, you have to be able to go and articulate it to people that may not want to listen to you. And that's what you saw with school boards across the state. They didn't care what the law said. They were listening to people that had an agenda, and that agenda was coming all the way from the governor, from the attorney general, from the state board of education. All of that influence was influencing the opinions that these legal school board or school law firms were giving their clients. And I could tell you, and I won't say these stories publicly, but I could tell you stories of lawyers from school law firms that knew I was right, but wouldn't say it publicly because they were scared what might happen to them politically as an institution, a law firm institution. And so I just had to get parents motivated enough to go in there and stand up and get labeled domestic terrorists, sadly, which was an unfortunate and inaccurate label. But it was going to always take that for anything to change. And that's all I was trying to do.
Right. And you did a beautiful job of it. I mean, my kids in the fall recognized your voice, Tom, because of all of your Facebook Lives. I mean, I'd be making dinner and I'd have it on speakerphone and they'd be like, "Is that Mr. DeVore? Oh, that's Mr. DeVore," because you were trying to encourage parents to know their rights and to speak up.
I never really appreciated it at the time. Looking back on that, all of those, doing those Facebook Lives, I had no idea if anybody was listening, to be honest with you. But that's all the effort was trying to do, is to get people to listen and to start taking some responsibility, I guess is a word I could use, or getting the courage to go start standing up for themselves, especially in the North. We can get to the conversation about you guys in the North here sometime soon, but I knew that's where it was all going to really play out. But to really appreciate, I always tell people, you know what the difference between Texas and Illinois is? It's not the law, it's the people. What people are willing to tolerate and accept is different. It just doesn't make one better, one worse, one good, one bad. It makes them different. And if you want things to change in Illinois, you have to change it. And it's really that simple. And that's all that those Facebook Lives were about. I didn't realize that so many people were listening.
Oh, they were listening, and you were speaking truth. And, I look at these little faces. This was in August of 2021. They were given slips they were sent home because they went to the first day of school unmasked. And I know that
What
these
day was
kids
that?
are now. This was August of 2021. This was very far south, like the southern point of Illinois. I forget the name of the county, but this family knew their rights and they brought their children to the school and they were sent home. And these sweet little faces, it should have never come to that point. And now, they're in private school because the parents just said, "We're done." But I love that they're smiling. I mean, to me, this is something that will be in like the history books. But look at what had to happen subsequent to that in order for due process to be given to all kids. So there were several kids that were sent home. Whoops, let me go back. There's one out of Palatine, a high school student. This was in West Central, high school kids. Yeah. And then meanwhile, while our kids were, in the lunchroom, distanced, like communist country, and then the superintendent lunch, look at them all unmasked and just so happy together. Yeah. So we were in Springfield. We went down let's go how all of these lawsuits came about with parents. It was a mad dash to get communities organized and to get to be participants in this lawsuit. I remember talking to other parent groups, and they were like, "How do we get on the lawsuit? What do we need to do?" And it was just this amazing grassroots effort to get the funds raised. It was 5,000 a district, and we did it in the fall in pretty quick time. I mean, it was a matter of, I don't know, a week, 2 weeks before you filed.
It was a quick time, and I actually had to shut it off because I never had that expectation. But let's go backwards a little bit. I think it's important that, as it relates again to the issue of the children and their educations and masking and exclusion and things of that nature. If you go back to the prior school year of 2020 to 2021, parents, for the most part, and I know when I have this conversation, I've always got those parents who want to say, not me, Tom, not me. And I'm like, okay, I understand that. But as a statewide proposition, parents just fell in line. They just fell in line, and the kids were masked, and they were being sent home, 4, 5, 6 times the whole school year for 2 weeks at a time. And there was never medically any risk to these kids, ever, whatsoever. But the parents allowed it. And let's just call it what it is. As a mass proposition, parents allowed it.
Right.
And we had a lawsuit in the fall of 2020 on behalf of 3 school districts. And the judge actually said the governor has the authority to do those things. The ruling was absolutely incorrect. But you know what? People, courts, nobody was ready to stand up because the people weren't ready. And so pretty much the whole 2020, 2021 school year, where my children were seniors, it went pretty much the way that government wanted it. And what people didn't appreciate, at least at higher levels of government, is how bad these kids were suffering.
Yeah.
It was immense. And you know what? By the time that school year ended in May of 2021, the parents saw it. The parents saw it. It was clear as day. And that's why that summer of 2021 is when things started to change. Because here I am sitting doing Facebook videos and going round and round going, when are people going to change? And I'm, kicking the tires constantly going, y'all are going to have to get up. Or you got a tyrant in office that's going to reign over you as long as you'll let him. And that summer is when I could tell. I could feel it across the state. People were starting to have enough because their kids were suffering.
Yeah.
And what happened in August of 2021? Pritzker doubled down again. That's where he made a mistake. He overplayed his hand is what he did. He doubled down. What people don't understand and appreciate is that prior to Pritzker issuing his executive order on August 4th of 2021, a few weeks prior, the Illinois Department of Health and the Illinois State Board of Education issued their whatever version of the joint guidance. Remember the joint guidance that they've now admitted was guidance? It's funny how things change, right? Now it was just like going to, what did my esteemed colleague, Mr. Kincaid, say? It's like going to the restaurant and reading at the bottom, we don't recommend you eat raw meat, but you can eat it if you want to. It's just guidance. This guidance that they put out in July of 2021, they made a mistake. They put the law in there about isolation and quarantine and who has the authority to do these things to children and who doesn't. And they put it in that guidance. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Then the governor issued his executive order that completely contradicted what the guidance said. Completely contradicted it. And none of these people in government are, I'm not going to be disrespectful, but they're not smart enough to understand these things. And so that's when I was like, okay, let's see how this works. The parents just getting more upset. And so at the end of August, I finally was like, okay, we're going to give it a shot. And so we filed, I don't remember where I filed the first lawsuit was at. It might have been Clinton County, maybe.
That guessing. Sounds about right. Yeah.
I think it's been so long. Clinton County, and the argument was not very complicated. I used their own documents against them, going, here's what their guidance says. I don't disagree with it. They're not the health department. It even said in the guidance that the school district doesn't have this authority, and I agreed with it. And so I go to court, And I'm like, the executive order, the courts for the most part didn't even care about the executive orders. And the Clinton County judge, I think it was Judge Schaefer, said, yeah, you can't do this to kids. Boom. Then there was another one and another. And I think after like 10 or 12 in a row of judges doing this, it started, guess what? It started getting the attention of you northern folks, right? Because I'm that downstate guy, they call me. But people in the north were listening. I knew you were listening.
Yeah, well, because we didn't have any attorneys in the Chicagoland area willing to take on this fight. They didn't have courage.
No, of course.
And so we tried. We were asking.
And I'm not going to disrespect my colleagues at all, but it's just human condition. It has nothing. It's not unique about lawyers. It can be about most people. They care about themselves, right? How's that going to affect how they're perceived in their profession, in their community, etc.? And they're not going.
They want to go to the Union League and have their cigars or the country club, and they don't want to have to get uncomfortable. No, of course not.
They're not going to risk anything. And so a friend of mine, who's a lawyer and a friend of mine, we had a case in Bond County. The judge ruled the same thing. You can't do this to these kids. So we go to the appellate court in the 5th down here in my part of the world. And the appellate court said that the governor was a necessary party. He needed to be in these cases. I disagree. I still disagree to this day. But that's okay. So when they said that the governor needed to be a necessary party, that I need to add him in the case, I knew we were going to end up in Springfield. I knew it was eventually going to happen. And I was like, okay. So, and I knew it was all going to be one case now, right?
Right.
Eventually. So I'm like, okay. I'm like, and I knew that the way for us to ever get anywhere is it had to get the people's attention statewide. Because the governor was doing everything in his power to marginalize these efforts. He did not want the people of the North to know what was going on. That small fringe minority was his plan. Now, at the same time, what many people don't know is that we had a case where we actually represented 3 school districts, not the parents against the school district, represented the school districts against who? ISB. And the argument is that ISB does not have the authority to threaten your recognition status and your funding and all of that nonsense because you wouldn't follow the governor's executive order as a local school district. Right. We filed that case on behalf of 3 districts. I offered to file it on behalf of any school district in the state that wanted it. 3 joined. And guess what? They won. And those school districts never had a mask on a kid at any point in time that whole school year. Because
how many
the
died?
Judge said,
how many
died?
Do it.
Huh?
How many died? I'm being sarcastic.
Exactly.
The kids were fine.
So that case was going on at the same time. So then I was like, okay, this is going to get consent. So I get a call from the governor's lawyers. Should have been your lawyers, the attorney general's office, but they were whatever the governor wants from the AG's office, the governor gets, because Kwame Raoul is a lapdog of Pritzker. People shouldn't even be debating that. And he's like, let's consolidate them all together. I'm like, well, it's going to happen anyway. So what the governor's office was trying to do was consolidate my 8 or 10 cases that I then had pending at that time from all of these Southern Illinois school districts. He's wanting to consolidate them into one case for one reason. He wanted to bury it in the eyes of the public, right? And these men, no disrespect, they think they're smart. They're not smarter than any of the rest of us. I'm not saying they're stupid, but they're not going to, outthink. They think everybody else is stupid if you're not a part of their group. And so they want to bury these 8 or 10 cases into one case in Springfield and make it go away, because if the people of the North get riled up, they know they're in trouble. So I was like, okay. And we're like, let's join some more school districts into this case. We'll get their attention. because I know we got to get their attention. And so we talked about it and what it would take, how we would do it. I tried to get other law firms to join in with me. I couldn't get them. And we opened it up, and within a matter of a week, there's 145 of you. And I'm like, holy crap. And so I told my staff,
it was amazing.
It was amazing. And it was like, I mean, I spent, now granted, once that happened, for a long time, I was on the phone 18 hours a day talking to people, but I was okay. That's what I got hired for, right? People like, oh, you got 145 school districts and they paid you. I'm like, yeah. And I spent 18, 20 hours a day on the phone for a long time. So that's okay. But that 145 school districts, you know what that did? Couldn't hide anymore. The governor could not hide. Right?
No, it blew the lid off. And I would like to say, for any parents who were part of the lawsuit or were part of that frenzy to get the funds raised, make some comments here and just share, what that was like, because I have to tell you, there were some amazing community members that stood up for these families whose children were struggling. Healthy kids were being unlawfully quarantined, kept away from school, kept away from their sports. The forced masking, and there were people in communities that donated whose kids weren't even in the district. Maybe they didn't have kids, and they were very generous to raise those funds. And so I know that it was really a beautiful testimony to community. So feel free to comment, because it happened it was unprecedented to see what these parents and communities did to get on the lawsuit. You were the only one willing to do it. Parents were just desperate. And I'm sharing some comments here. Christy, we did it here in 161. Rebecca, you resurrected the kids' quality of life. I mean, it's true. This was a big deal. And it was a beautiful testimony to what you have always said. When the people rise up, it will happen.
Right. And so that case of 146 total, actually, counting Hillsborough, that was kind of separate for procedural reasons. There was no way that Pritzker could hide it anymore. Because that's all, his whole game plan as a politician is to create a facade. It's like a movie. His whole campaign is like a movie, and his governance is like a movie. Marginalize anything that he might have a problem with. And that's what he does. He couldn't marginalize this anymore. Win or lose that case, at that time, it was not going to be marginalized. And so it eventually worked its way through, and again, you know that story as well as the rest of us. But it was, not only did it get to where the governor couldn't marginalize it anymore, it had another big issue, a big accomplishment. The school districts couldn't hide anymore. Right. Because all of these school districts, except maybe one or two, but pretty much all of them, you can use all of them, and you're still going to be accurate. They were hiding behind the governor. Oh, we can't do anything about it because we'll lose our funding, and we have to do what the governor says. It was all BS. It was all a big pretext from these schools hiding behind it. They couldn't hide anymore when they're front and center in a courtroom. You know how many of those school districts actually came into court and argued that they were only doing what the governor said? None of them. None of them. They didn't argue that in any court pleading that the governor was making them do anything. It was that, so these schools got interjected into that case. And the only reason they got interjected, sadly, is because they didn't stand up for their parents and their children on their own. We would have never found ourselves, Shannon, in that court case if the school districts across this state would have said, you don't control us. We will manage our own school district in conjunction with our local health department. If you want to go there, I'm fine with that. And we will make the policies that we think's best, governor. Get out of here. If they would have done that, would have been over. The governor his executive orders were nothing but a big facade. They were a big sham. There's nothing.
But that goes to, isn't that a testimony to that local elections matter. That's why people are already
Yes.
talking about school board campaigns, because they're sick and tired of the bootlickers and the people who bow to special interests, and they want their communities back.
They do. It's the local elections are everything. And it many times you will find me saying and leaving, albeit the people that have passed away, because that's always tragic, but we have to sometimes
Of course.
parse the good and the bad with anything. In some fashions, politically like this, COVID has been a good thing. Because the things that are happening in government and have been happening in government for a long time, the people were completely oblivious to. They were
Right.
oblivious to it. And that's one of the things that I find I'm more critical of myself than I am of other people, is because I've known a long time. I've known that government is the way that it is, and that you have all now had that onion peeled back, and your
Right.
naivety of the government is starting to go away. I've known that they're not, these grand, we're all about these school, no disrespect to our school districts, no disrespect, because people say, oh, Tom doesn't like, education is everything. But this whole myriad of how we're all here for the children, and we create this big, you're smiling, it's all a bunch of crap.
Right.
It's a
Right.
big bureaucracy.
It is a
And when
big
it came
bureaucracy. Yeah.
time, Shannon, it came time for these districts to truly and generally stand up for these children and say, we protect them. What'd they do? What'd they do? They ran like a bunch of cowards, and they had their hand out looking for the ESSER funds, and they were
Right.
willing to let your children suffer on a grand scale
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
money
Never forget. Never
and
forget.
influence and fear. That's what almost every school district in this state did. And I wouldn't elect any of those bums back if it
That's
was
right.
me. In my
Amen to
district that
that.
I live in, I know who the bums are. And I know who, when election time comes around, I will use every bit of political influence I have to make sure they never get elected again. And I know the ones that stood up, right?
Right. And you also took on the fight for teachers. Somebody said that some of us stood up and were terminated. This hit all sides of that the big bureaucratic machine you're talking about with public education. So it wasn't just the kids, it was educators and staff too. And I know that you were championing their due process rights also.
Yeah, this is not about politics. People hear me talk all the time. I have just as much disdain for Republicans as I do Democrats, because they're
Same.
all interested in power. They're not interested in helping people.
Yeah.
Show me a there's a few, don't get me wrong, but overwhelmingly as a governing body,
Right.
show me that wants to say helping people is my first priority. No, it's not. It's getting elected. That's their
Yeah.
first priority. And it makes me sick, and I hang it on all of them. What did the Republican minority do the last 2 years to fight for people? Nothing. They didn't do anything. Oh, we're in the minority. We can't do anything. And I'm like, shut up. Why don't you fight? Even if
Right.
you
Yeah. And
lose.
a few did try, but there weren't enough. I agree. There
I'm
weren't
talking
enough.
the whole body. I'm not going
Yeah.
to say
Yeah.
this one did,
Sure.
this one didn't. Set
Yeah.
that
But you're
aside. I'm
right.
talking as
You're
a
right.
body of
Yes.
government in the
Agreed.
minority. The House
Look at what
minority.
Anne Marie said real quickly. These people I want to give props to.
Sure, go
Anne
ahead.
Marie said her kids were grown, but she donated to the lawsuit where you represented communities. It was worth it for my future grandchildren. I hear that a lot, Tom. I hear that a lot from older generations who are seeing what's happened to their kids and their grandkids, and they're just disgusted by it. Freedom Initiative helped us raise funds. It was a really beautiful testimony to coming together. I like hearing about these stories because it's important to remember.
I do, and I like hearing about it too. And one of the things now that I try to talk to people about is, let me back up. When they founded this nation, I've read the papers. It's beautiful stuff. I mean, you read that and it's like they just left where we're headed. You can see it clear as day. You know what the biggest risk that they thought this nation had to succeed? It was us. We were the biggest risk, because they're like, people will be too lazy and too complacent because of what this nation has to offer that they won't continue to keep the republic intact. They were right. And here we find ourselves now talking about the things you and I are talking about is because the last however many, I'm 53 years old, how many decades we didn't pay any attention to what was going on because we were busy living our lives, and we're allowing this republic to deteriorate and to become more like what it was we left, which is what I'm fighting about. Everything I'm fighting about is the excessive use of executive authority, whether it's Governor Pritzker, whether it's Governor DeSantis, whether it's President Trump, whether it's President Biden. They're all executives, right? That abuse of executive power is going to destroy this nation. We've got to get back to the power being in the legislative branch of government with people. And if the legislature wants to pass a law that puts a mask on your child during times of a pandemic, well, then pass that law and the people can get mad and they can unelect you. But that is a far different cry than a governor standing there threatening its people, calling them the enemy, for God's sakes, if they don't do what he wants. That can't be.
So to come full circle, you know, the lawsuits took place. February 4th was my mom's birthday, so I remember when that came down on a Friday, and you know, I think you were getting ready to travel. Like, it was like a perfect storm of good news. I just remember how relieved everybody was, and I know schools were panicked, but who cares? They get paid good money. They figured it out. But that was a huge weight off of the state's shoulders, and it proved, and you actually proved, Tom, to be the cause of Pritzker's only loss, right? In his term of governor. It's the only time he's been forced to lose something.
Yeah, I can see where people,
even if it's symbolic.
Okay, yeah, he lost a lot. It's just that was the most public loss that he had, right?
Yes.
But let's talk about the loss, because to me, I don't look at that as a loss for Pritzker. To be honest with you, I don't care about that guy. He needs to be unelected and never hold an office again in his life. And I would say that if he was a Republican, but because he didn't lose, the people won, and let me tell you why they won.
For sure.
That court order that got issued on February 4th, most don't understand it, and that's okay. It was very narrow. All the judge said is that these children, in this case, 711 of them, I think, if I recall, something like 711 parents, however many children, I don't have that number. Your children cannot be required to wear a mask to school on Monday, and they cannot be excluded from school because of some, vague close contact analysis. That's all it said. Of those 146 school districts, those kids, within 2 days, Shannon, that weekend, I think it was over 200 school districts went fully mask optional.
Yeah.
Within a week.
Right.
700 and something.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. It was amazing.
The lawsuit had nothing to do with that. Nothing. You know what it had to do with? Those pictures that you were showing people before we started. Yeah. It was all that it was to do with, is that the people, that lawsuit gave them courage. Right. It gave them courage. They only ever needed courage. It's all they ever needed.
Right. And that was a big check on the governor, though, and of the tyrannical rule that he'd been placing on Illinois citizens. And it's amazing to me how many people don't know that Kwame Raoul, as Attorney General, is actually an Attorney General office for the people of Illinois. Some people thought that he was the default attorney for Governor Pritzker. So some people don't even understand the purpose of the office of Attorney General. So that was a big check on governor and all of the bootlickers. And so now, I want to bring people's attention to this QR code here. Communities in the fall of 2021 rallied to get on the lawsuit. It was a huge victory for the people. And I know it was a multi-pronged approach, but you still have to give yourself a lot of credit for being the attorney who stood up for the people. And you went from running for an appellate judge position. It was not, you weren't targeting a run for Attorney General for statewide office. It's a big leap. And I think I looked it up. The appellate judge role is a pretty good role in the state of Illinois. I think it's like 280,000 a year or something. It's a pretty good gig.
220.
220. All right, 220. Private practice, you can make good money, which is what you've been in up until this point. And attorney general makes 180,000 a year. Not that it's all about money, but I mean, you took a big leap to say, well, I did all of this through the state of Illinois, and now I'm going to run for attorney general. Statewide office. It's a big leap, and it's costly. I just realized this. I don't think people realize how expensive it is to run for statewide office. And you're a grassroots candidate. So this QR code is going to, if people share it and scan it, this is another opportunity to bring a check back to the governor, back to the state of Illinois, to contribute to your campaign. Kwame Raoul, I looked it up in my notes. I've got it here. He raised $9 million when he ran for attorney general. He was gifted that from the Democrats and J.B. Pritzker. A lot of money in the coffers. And people very quickly.
That's why Kwame does what they want, Shannon.
Yeah.
Kwame Raoul knows that if he does not do exactly what Pritzker and the Democratic machine want of him, that they will not support his financial re-election efforts. And nobody knows who he is because he's never done anything for anybody in his life but himself. And so if he doesn't have the support of the Democratic machine, he has no support. I can assure you that the Republican, we don't really have a Republican machine in Illinois, sadly.
We have a grassroots one, though.
We have a grassroots
one. Right.
But, you know, we still, if you want to be a Republican and win a statewide election in Illinois, you know, you have your options of financing that are not as broad as the Democrats. And so, you know, right, it's going to take several $1 million to run this campaign, and Mike Madigan and J.B. Pritzker are not going to give me any money. And that money goes for the getting your message out. Primarily that the money raised doesn't go to a bunch of people because the volunteers are a godsend, but it goes to mailers and TV ads and stuff like that. Because all of us that are listening to this right now, we're not the ones that we're trying to talk to for a statewide election. There's a whole plethora of people that don't talk in the same echo chambers that we talk in.
Right.
We have to talk to them and get our message to them, and that takes money.
Right. And so I think there are a few things that people can do to bring common sense back to the state of Illinois. And I know the attorney general role is a big deal because it does bring balance and power back to the people. So there's a QR code for people to contribute donations, share with people, particularly who maybe don't have young children. I think there are a lot of people who don't understand what that fight was all about, but they do believe in balanced government. So talk to multiple generations of people, your neighbors, wherever you are. Hey, vote Tom DeVore for attorney general. And so that's one way to donate, right? And then the other way is to tell people. There's like a family and friends thing at your website I've seen where people can print out a letter, send it to 10 friends. 10 friends in 10 minutes, easy peasy. So it's not all just about money, although money is very important in a statewide race, but there are a lot of different ways people can contribute.
Absolutely. I mean, the money has to do with messaging. There's other ways to message that don't take as much money, but you have to do both, right? You have to have the ability to do both. And as far as the races go, to me in Illinois right now, the two most important races, and I would be saying this if I was still a private practice attorney, the two most important races in Illinois are the Supreme Court races that are coming up, and the second and the third. And the attorney general's race are the most important races in the near future in Illinois.
Absolutely.
That's my opinion, not as a candidate. That's my opinion.
No, I think you're right. And talking to people across the country that are very involved in the future of America, they're watching Illinois right now. And I mean, those of us who are maybe more involved in politics or advocacy know this, but when you talk to other states, they do not want J.B. Pritzker to be their president. He thinks he's going to be. And they're saying, oh, hell no. And they know how important it is to defeat him for this race. Yep. They also know that if you get elected to attorney general, you will be able to sniff out any level of corruption, whether it's Pritzker or whoever. and you could be an amazing checks and balance. And so I think that people are tuning into this a little bit more. So I think people should share your campaign information with people outside of Illinois, because they don't want Pritzker to be their governor. I mean, sorry, their president.
Illinois is, in fact, I agree with this. Illinois is going to be a benchmark for national politics. If Illinois can change the direction that it's headed, it will have a ripple effect across this nation. There is no doubt about that. J.B.
Right.
Pritzker would be the most horrific choice for the people of this nation as governor. I don't care what party he's from. That's got nothing to do with it. It would be horrific. He's issued 130 something executive orders since he's been in office. 130
Right.
something. He's been
Right.
ruling over people like a tyrant. You want to put that man as the president of the United States? No way. That's
no. And so I think that this is really important for people to know, to support you, Tom. Obviously, governor, all of these top ballot roles are really important. You bring up a good point about the Supreme Court. Burke and Curran are two of the conservatives running for Supreme Court. It hasn't been conservative since 1964. And I know that is something that other people across the country are paying attention to. It's another form of checks and balances.
Some of the cases that are pending and could be brought related to this whole COVID pandemic, lawyers would be reluctant right now to bring some of these cases to the state Supreme Court. Just let me say that, right?
Sure.
I have some cases that I would love to argue with the Supreme Court. That's just the political realities are what they are. And sadly, when it comes to the Republican Party, they want to criticize some of the candidates that we have in that race. And I'm like, really? You want to not vote or go vote for the Democrat? I mean, is that your option because your ideal candidate didn't make it through the primary? I mean, sometimes Republicans are their own worst enemy, Shannon.
I know. They have to get over themselves. They really do. And it's, I think
but
that common sense is coming back. Yeah.
Those two races are extreme. I don't live in the second or the third, but those two races are extremely important that I'm going to be watching very closely, because those races could change the state of Illinois.
They are. And the people across the country are talking about it. So I wanted to ask you so mid-January 2023 would be when you would take oath of office for Attorney General. What is your office's platform going to be? So you walk in and you're putting your posters that are there behind you in your office. You're ready to get to work. What does your platform look like?
Oh, yeah. Here we go. I've told people a couple of things. We will make it known on day one that if Kim Foxx is not prosecuting a criminal that's committed a crime in Cook County, I will prosecute them through our office directly. I can and I will. If we don't get that crime under control, and the Safety Act comes into effect, it is going to ripple across this state. Chicago is an example of where some of our other cities in the states will go if we don't put an end to that. I talked to you about it before we started today, Shannon. We got the video in one of the prominent neighborhoods of Cook County, Chicago area.
Nice area. Yeah.
Sunday afternoon at 3:00, 3 men get out of the car and rob her in broad daylight. The video's online. That happens because there's no fear of the consequences. When there's no fear of the consequences, people do bad stuff. That's what's going on.
Right.
Corruption.
Right.
Corruption. I'm glad you asked me this question. I've been spending a lot of time in Chicago area, South Side, West Side, talking to a lot of the people in the Black community. And you know what they say to me? They say, Tom, they said, what's been going on the last couple of years with Governor Pritzker and the things he's been doing, and some of these other governments really doing these things, they're like, welcome to the show. They said our mayors and our communities have been corrupt for decades, doing these things to us, and nobody talks about it. And they're like, so if you want to talk about corruption, they said, come on, see us. We'll give you a whole laundry list of corrupt mayors and city council members that have been doing things to us for decades, and Kwame Raoul doesn't listen. And you know what? Those Black folks are right. They're like, welcome to the show. There's nothing new for us. And
I know. So, do you want me to show this video real quickly? The one you mentioned, in case people haven't seen it. Let me see if I can get I want to make sure I I don't know if
Yesterday afternoon, a woman was walking on the sidewalk. There she is right there, 2900 block of North Sealy. You can see 4 people rush up to her and then push her to the ground. Police say one of them had a gun and robbed her. No one is in custody.
So that was at 3 p.m. in Lakeview. And actually, when you hear the full video, it's pretty terrifying. The woman is screaming for her life.
Yep.
Nobody came to help her.
But yeah, so the corruption issue, we've got the big corruption issues too, like the Pritzker and the Thornley work comp matter, that fraud. He's directly implicated in that fraud, and Kwame Raoul's covering it up for him. On day one, the Attorney General's office is going to be prosecuting somebody in the Thornley work comp matter. Thornley herself, Ann Spillane, Governor Pritzker, they're going to be prosecuted. That's crystal case fraud. But more broadly than that, we will have a whole division that deals with public corruption, and I will prosecute the corrupt politicians at every level across this state for the whole term. I'll get as many people as I can dedicate to that department, because nobody trusts their government anymore, because the pay to play, the crooked politicians, they do whatever the hell they want, and Kwame Raoul's never prosecuted one of them. So that's what I'm going to do.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's great, Tom. And obviously I've been watching your work for a while. It's personal to me. I have 3 children who benefited from your fight, as have many other parents. But we need to take it beyond our echo chamber of the kids. And so people need to tell their friends. Please use this QR code, and it will be shared in a link on the comments so people can share it. But it's really about holding our government accountable. We know you'll do it. We know you're hustling, you're working hard. This was a big leap for you. It was a sacrifice, and we're looking forward to seeing you be the next Attorney General of Illinois. What's going on with the campaign trail?
Oh, we've got several things this week. The holiday weekend's over, so we're going to be up in the city tomorrow and the rest of the week, and we're going to be all over the place. So after the holiday week, September's here now. I mean, it's only, we're 2 months away. Getting people's attention even 2 months before an election sometimes is difficult. And so we're doing everything we can just to get people to start looking at this race and the other races a little bit sooner than 2 weeks before the election cycle. But, we're doing what we can.
So Christy said she donated to your campaign. So that's awesome. And so people can pay attention to different areas, have, leaders with your campaign, right, that are getting yard signs out, literature. I know with our grassroots coalition, restoreil.org, we have some days of action and some bags for people to take out with different candidates, including the Supreme Court candidates, your stuff. And so I think it's really easy for people to, share that you're taking donations for your campaign. They can walk literature. I know a lot of moms that are doing stroller brigades where they're just taking literature door to door during the day, maybe an hour before school, pick up. And so I think that this is going to be a really successful grassroots effort over the next 2 months. And I'm really excited to see you get elected.
We are, and again, I'm really looking forward to the grassroots effort, because there's a commonality between people. Those politicians want to divide people, right? And the only person that I really have any disdain for is Pritzker. Most Democrats are good people. I mean, you got the far left fringy, but you got the far right fringy too. So I kind of just wipe them out, and on both sides. And most people are normal, but what they want their government to work for them. And so those who may have agreed with Governor Pritzker's policies the last 2 years should still be concerned, because that whole effort that he undertook put a governor in place besides him and pick the opposite of Pritzker and give him that same power. Right? Give the opposite of Governor Pritzker the same power that Governor Pritzker just wielded. And I tell you what, they're not going to like it. You know who they're going to call, Shannon? They're going to call me.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to call me to help them, because the governor's doing things to them that he doesn't have the authority to do. That's the problem right there. That's the message. And reining that power in is what it's all about.
Love it. I know that your passion is going to save Illinois from all of this crazy government overreach and tyrannical rule. You're going to hold people accountable. So the QR code links to this webpage that your campaign put together. People can do donations here At your website, there's also the family and friends letter that people can send 10 letters in 10 minutes. Send them out an email, send them in the mail. There are a lot of ways that people can support your campaign. It's going to take regular people. I say it all the time. Regular people will save Illinois and save this country. So get to it. This is a call of action from me as a mom, as an advocate, to say whatever you can do to support Tom. I'm grateful that you contributed an hour of your time, Tom, to talk to everybody. A lot
My
of
pleasure.
engagement. A lot of engagement. Anything else you want to say before we close out?
No, like I said, it's just, I leave people with where I usually end up anyway, Shannon, is there are no political heroes in this world. None of them. There's only people. And if they're not going to do it, then nobody's going to do it. I get so frustrated, even, you know, it doesn't matter what party somebody's from, somebody's got to do something.
Yeah.
Who the hell is somebody? I don't know who that is. It's people. And if they're not going to do it, nothing's going to change. It's that simple. So, you know, I was in Des Moines, which is a very red area, and I was not kind to them. I'm like, you're sitting here eating your chicken sandwich, thinking that you come and spend 15 minutes listening to us talk and you're doing your part as a citizen of this state. You're not doing anything. You got to get involved at some measure and some level to help change things. And if you don't, nothing will change. And that's just the way it is.
Right. No, people have definitely woken up. I mean, that's why we're called Awake Illinois. We want to make sure people stay awake. It's not just about right before the election or the day after. It's a long game. And so I know you're in it for the long haul. I'm going to tell people, don't be like this. Don't be like this guy. You need to get off your buns and do something. Don't be like the General Patton. He's Patton after the general. So be like Tom, be like all of these grassroots mama bears and papa bears that are getting things done. So Tom, good luck to you on the rest of the campaign. Contribute whichever way you can, you guys. This is really important. So share this Facebook Live with friends, share the QR code, and onward and upward. I hope everybody has a great day. God bless. Thank you, Tom, and thank you everybody for watching.
Thank you very much. See you.